My name is Eleanor, a 32-year-old woman who simply wanted to protect my dying father from her endless toxicity. She immediately pinned me against the cold wall while relentlessly hurling bitter insults for 15 straight minutes without showing a single ounce of mercy. Looking directly into my eyes, she screamed that I was a complete failure before declaring, "I will take everything he has, including the house, and you deserve nothing but to live on the street." Facing her absolute madness, I simply maintained my calm composure to block her overwhelming greed by replying, "This is not the time to talk about this." Right at the exact moment she felt most triumphant about her cruel takeover scheme, a strange man suddenly pushed the heavy door open to enter the room. That unexpected arrival instantly drained all the color from her face until she looked completely pale with pure, undeniable shock. Her arrogant attitude completely evaporated in a split second because she finally realized her carefully calculated, greedy plan was falling apart right before her eyes. Before I reveal the shocking truth behind her ultimate downfall, please be sure to hit the notification bell right now so you never miss out on any of our intense, real-life family dramas. My daily existence revolves entirely around an aging brick house, heavily shaded by massive oak trees in Baton Rouge, where I dedicate all my time to managing the rapidly declining health of my father. While I willingly put my own career aspirations on permanent hold to stay home, coordinating his complicated medical routines, my sister Valerie abandoned this household many years ago to chase a glamorous lifestyle far away from our struggles. She firmly decided that taking care of an elderly parent was simply too much of a massive inconvenience for her busy schedule, so she left without ever looking back. I accepted the heavy responsibility of managing his doctor's appointments, as well as daily medications, because leaving him alone was simply never an option for me. Valerie preferred attending luxurious parties while building her own social status by completely removing herself from the harsh reality of our difficult situation back home. The stark contrast between our choices became undeniably clear as I constantly struggled to organize thick stacks of expensive hospital bills while fighting through severe physical exhaustion every single day. Instead of offering any tangible support, Valerie only bothered to call exactly once a month with incredibly shallow questions about the local weather or trivial celebrity gossip that meant absolutely nothing. She absolutely never contributed a single dollar toward the mounting medical expenses, or asked how I was coping with the overwhelming pressure of being a full-time caregiver. Her brief phone conversations always felt like a mandatory chore she needed to check off her list rather than a genuine attempt to connect with her own family. I spent countless sleepless nights figuring out how to afford his prescription medications, while she posted pictures of her expensive vacations online without a single care in the world. Despite his advanced age, along with rapidly failing physical strength, Dad remained remarkably sharp mentally, while seeing right through the extreme coldness of his eldest daughter. He carried a deep, unspoken sorrow regarding her absolute lack of empathy, which he frequently shared with me during our quiet dinners at the old wooden kitchen table. He would often look down at his trembling hands, expressing profound disappointment that his own child could become so completely detached from the people who raised her. Dad explicitly told me during those quiet evenings that he felt like a burden to her, while knowing she only called out of a forced sense of obligation. Those quiet evening confessions revealed just how much her calculated distance broke his heart, because he finally accepted that she only truly cared about herself, along with her own material wealth. This depressing routine abruptly shifted into something highly suspicious when Valerie unexpectedly sent a late-night text message announcing she was coming home for a visit after years of absence. Instead of expressing any actual concern about his recent test results, her message contained deeply unsettling questions probing into the current location of the property deed. She blatantly asked whether the surrounding neighborhood property values had increased recently, while demanding to know exactly whose name was officially listed on the primary estate documents. I stared at the bright phone screen in complete disbelief, because her carefully typed words lacked any genuine warmth or basic familial concern whatsoever. That bizarre message immediately raised massive red flags because she had never once shown the slightest interest in our real estate or legal affairs before his health took a severe, irreversible downturn. Sensing the deeply impure motives hiding behind this sudden upcoming visit, Dad, along with myself, immediately heightened our defenses by having a very serious discussion about her true intentions. We both silently understood without needing further explanation that her sudden reappearance was completely driven by financial greed rather than any sudden spark of familial love or a desire to make amends. We made a firm, mutual agreement to carefully scrutinize her every single move the moment she stepped foot through our front door to protect what rightfully belonged to him. Dad specifically instructed me to keep all important financial documents locked securely away in his desk drawer so she could not snoop through them behind our backs. Neither of us harbored any naive illusions about a happy family reunion because we knew exactly what she was coming to claim, so we refused to be caught unprepared. 3 days after sending that highly suspicious text message, Valerie finally stepped across our front porch, carrying heavy designer luggage while radiating an incredibly condescending attitude. She completely bypassed the opportunity to ask about the declining physical condition of my father upon entering the living room, because her immediate focus was entirely elsewhere. Instead of showing any genuine concern, she sharply scanned the space with calculating eyes, while silently evaluating exactly how much our antique furniture might fetch at an expensive auction. Her cold gaze lingered on the vintage grandfather clock, along with the classic silver dining sets before offering a remarkably forced greeting devoid of any warmth. She treated our childhood home like a profitable real estate acquisition, rather than a place filled with precious family memories built over several decades. Later that same afternoon, I happened to be walking quietly past the darkened hallway near the guest bedroom when a sudden hushed voice forced me to freeze in my tracks. I distinctly heard Valerie speaking through her cell phone in a deeply calculating tone that immediately sent a chilling shiver straight down my spine. She was actively conducting a highly secretive conversation with a professional real estate agent regarding the future sale of the very property we were currently standing inside. Hiding in the dim shadows, I pressed my back against the cold plaster wall while straining my ears to catch every single disturbing syllable escaping her lips. The sheer audacity of her discussing property values while Dad rested painfully in the adjacent room made my stomach churn with absolute disgust. I held my breath completely while feeling the temperature in the corridor drop as Valerie delivered her instructions with terrifying precision. She spoke with a level of cruelty that I never truly thought possible from someone sharing my own bloodline while finalizing her morbid timeline. Without showing even a fraction of hesitation, she firmly commanded the agent by stating, "I want this house listed the second the old man takes his last breath. Do not delay." Hearing those exact words spoken aloud felt like a brutal physical blow to my chest because they confirmed our absolute worst fears regarding her underlying motives. She was practically counting down the final remaining minutes of his life just to secure a massive financial payout. The phone conversation continued down an even darker path when the agent apparently raised a question regarding my potential legal interference with the upcoming property sale. Valerie scoffed loudly into the receiver while dripping with pure arrogance before completely dismissing my entire existence with a single heartless declaration. She continued to mock my daily sacrifices by sneering into the phone. "My sister is just a naive maid. She will not be a problem when I take over." That specific insult burned deeply because she viewed my endless dedication to our sick parent as nothing more than foolish servitude that could be easily brushed aside. Her supreme overconfidence blinded her to the fact that I was actively standing just a few feet away, absorbing every piece of her treacherous plan. My hands trembled violently from the overwhelming surge of adrenaline pumping through my veins, but I managed to pull my smartphone from my pocket without making a single sound. I quickly tapped the recording application while praying the sensitive microphone would capture the remaining details of her incredibly toxic conversation clearly. I waited agonizingly for several more minutes to ensure I gathered undeniable audio evidence of her complete betrayal before she finally ended the lengthy call. Once the line went dead, I slowly retreated backward through the shadows while carefully timing my footsteps to mask any creaking from the old floorboards. Deep into the late hours of that very same night, I quietly slipped into the private bedroom where Dad was resting while securely locking the heavy wooden door behind me. I sat down gently on the edge of his mattress before playing the crystal-clear audio recording directly into the quiet stillness of the room. A profound wave of devastation instantly materialized within his tired eyes as he listened to his eldest child eagerly plotting to profit from his upcoming demise. He understood in that heartbreaking moment that he must confront the horrific nature of the person he brought into this world. The heavy silence that followed the recording cemented our shared realization that drastic defensive measures were now absolutely necessary. The next morning, following that disturbing audio discovery, I fabricated an urgent excuse about needing essential household groceries so I could hastily leave the premises to visit a secluded corner cafe. I purposely arranged a highly confidential meeting there with my best friend Brenda because her extensive career in the corporate financial sector provided her with a remarkably wide network of valuable information. I desperately needed someone with her specific professional expertise to quietly investigate exactly what kind of terrible monetary trouble Valerie was currently hiding from us behind her arrogant facade. Brenda possessed the unique ability to discreetly track down hidden financial irregularities that normal people would completely miss during a standard background check. We deliberately chose the most isolated booth in the back of the coffee shop to ensure nobody could accidentally overhear our incredibly sensitive conversation regarding my family. After taking a cautious sip of her dark roast coffee, Brenda slowly pushed a thin manila folder across the wooden table with a profoundly serious expression darkening her facial features. She leaned forward closer to my side of the booth before delivering a devastating revelation that instantly explained the extremely erratic behavior displayed by my estranged sibling. Maintaining intense eye contact with me to emphasize the gravity of the situation, Brenda stated, "Valerie is drowning in a massive gambling debt. The creditors are threatening to seize everything she owns." Hearing those exact words spoken aloud felt like a heavy bucket of freezing ice water had just been poured directly over my head while sitting in that quiet cafe. The terrifying reality of her true underlying motive suddenly became crystal clear as I finally understood exactly why she was rushing to liquidate our beloved family estate with such reckless desperation. Recognizing my visible state of shock, Brenda reached out across the table to tightly grasp my trembling hands in a powerful gesture of unwavering moral support. Looking deeply into my eyes with fierce protective determination, she firmly warned me, "You have to protect your father and the house she is desperate enough to do anything." That stark warning echoed loudly inside my mind because a cornered person facing total financial ruin would never hesitate to destroy their own relatives to save themselves. The undeniable truth embedded within her urgent warning completely snapped me out of my temporary paralysis while filling my chest with a burning sense of fierce protective determination. I immediately stood up from the wooden booth, while expressing my deepest heartfelt gratitude to Brenda for dedicating her personal time to uncovering the ugly truth hidden beneath the surface. I practically sprinted toward my parked vehicle before driving straight back to our property, with an ironclad resolve hardening my defensive mindset along the way. I firmly swore to myself during that tense car ride that I would absolutely never allow her bottomless greed to tear this vulnerable family apart under my watch. The exact moment I stepped cautiously back inside our quiet hallway, I walked straight toward the master bedroom before securely locking the heavy wooden door behind me to ensure complete privacy. I sat down directly across from Dad so we were positioned face to face in the dimly lit room without any possibility of being interrupted by unwanted listeners lurking nearby. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I systematically presented the entire ugly truth regarding the massive underground gambling debt currently crushing Valerie under its immense, suffocating weight. I laid out every single horrifying detail Brenda had painstakingly discovered so he could fully comprehend the sheer magnitude of the impending financial threat hovering over our peaceful home. Dad squeezed his tired eyes tightly shut, while a profound wave of visible agonizing pain washed over his aging face upon hearing my grim investigative report. However, that momentary display of heartbreaking paternal grief quickly transformed into something much sharper as he suddenly opened his eyes with renewed absolute mental clarity. He immediately began outlining an incredibly bold plan involving a staged critical medical emergency at the local hospital to force Valerie into revealing her true face publicly without any filter. He needed absolute, undeniable proof of her ultimate betrayal right in front of official witnesses before legally finalizing the permanent alterations to his last will. Exactly at midnight that Friday, the piercing siren of an ambulance tore through the quiet Baton Rouge night, while officially launching the elaborate performance my father, along with myself, had so meticulously prepared in total secrecy. The thick, humid air seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the flashing red lights as the medical crew carefully moved the heavy stretcher toward the waiting vehicle, while I struggled to maintain a look of genuine panic for any curious neighbors. I stood on the damp porch watching the paramedics secure Dad inside the van, while my fingers fumbled with the cold glass screen of my phone to initiate the most important call of our lives. Once the vehicle pulled away into the darkness, I pressed the receiver to my ear, while feeling the heavy silence of the neighborhood weighing down on my shoulders with an almost suffocating pressure. I made sure to project a voice filled with convincing terror along with ragged breaths to effectively communicate the fabricated idea that his physical condition was taking a sharp, irreversible turn for the worse. Gasping for air between forced sobs into the line, I desperately pleaded with her by saying, "Valerie, you need to get to the hospital immediately. He is running out of time." Instead of hearing even the slightest shred of sisterly empathy or genuine sorrow, her cold response resonated through the speaker with a calculating sharpness that confirmed her absolute greed once again. Without even bothering to ask about his heart rate or current pain levels, she strictly commanded me by stating, "I am on my way. Make sure nobody touches his legal documents until I arrive." Her primary focus remained entirely on the preservation of the estate paperwork, rather than the survival of the very man who had provided for her every single whim since her childhood. I ended the call while feeling a bitter mixture of lingering disappointment, along with a renewed sense of purpose because her coldness was far worse than I had originally imagined. By the time I reached the private hospital wing, Dad was already positioned within a specialized intensive care suite, where the dim fluorescent lighting created a somber atmosphere of impending tragedy. He lay perfectly still upon the crisp white sheets, while various medical monitors emitted a rhythmic, steady beeping sound that mimicked the heartbeat of a person in grave danger. Although his eyes were tightly closed to maintain the illusion of unconsciousness, I knew he was actually fully alert, with every sense sharpened to absorb the upcoming confrontation from his position. The sterile scent of antiseptic, along with the distant humming of the building ventilation system, added a layer of eerie realism to our carefully choreographed trap designed to expose her underlying darkness. I leaned over his bed for a brief moment to whisper that the plan was proceeding exactly as we had discussed, while squeezing his hand to offer a final silent gesture of our shared resolve. I positioned myself strategically in the dimly lit hallway, directly outside the slightly ajar door, while tightly clutching a bundle of official-looking billing statements against my chest to enhance the performance. I intentionally let my hair fall messily over my tired face, while maintaining a slumped posture to radiate the believable image of a daughter completely crushed by the weight of an unbearable situation. Every heavy breath I took was calculated to draw her deeper into the illusion so that she would feel comfortable enough to drop her guarded mask the very moment she arrived. The flickering light at the end of the long corridor cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to dance across the polished floor while I waited in the agonizing stillness for the predator to appear. My fingers were cramped from gripping the paper folders so tightly, but the physical discomfort actually helped me maintain the necessary look of frantic desperation, while I listened to the quiet murmurs of night nurses in the distance. The heavy silence of the medical wing remained undisturbed for several minutes, until the unmistakable sound of sharp designer heels clacking loudly against the tile floor began to echo through the empty corridor. That aggressive rhythmic noise grew steadily louder with every passing second until the vibration seemed to travel through the very boards of the sterile hallway where I stood waiting. Valerie was marching toward the room with a sense of frantic urgency, driven entirely by her terrifying fear of losing her perceived right to a massive inheritance payout. She was certainly not motivated by a sudden surge of familial devotion or a heartfelt desire to say a final goodbye to the man who was supposedly dying just a few feet away. I took one last deep breath to steady my nerves while feeling my heart race with a mixture of genuine anxiety along with a fierce desire to finally see her true nature revealed to the world. As she rounded the corner, her face was set in a grim expression of determination, while her eyes searched the hallway specifically for me rather than looking for the entrance to her father's room. She moved with a predatory grace that showed absolutely no signs of the grief or exhaustion that one would expect from a daughter whose parent was allegedly taking his final breaths. The clacking of her heels finally stopped directly in front of me, while she adjusted the expensive leather strap of her handbag with a sharp, jerky movement that betrayed her inner agitation. I looked up at her through tear-blurred eyes while preparing myself for the inevitable onslaught of cruelty that I knew was about to erupt from her lips. The stage was perfectly set for the final act of this tragedy, while the recording device tucked safely inside my pocket remained ready to capture every single word of her upcoming betrayal. Just 15 minutes after that frantic phone call, Valerie appeared at the hospital room entrance with a face tightened by stress, yet her cold eyes never once drifted toward the bed where Dad lay quietly. She moved with a predatory focus that completely ignored the medical equipment as well as the somber atmosphere of the intensive care unit surrounding our family. Instead of checking on his condition or speaking to a nurse, she marched directly toward the corner where I was standing with my head bowed in fake sorrow. Her presence felt incredibly heavy with an aggressive energy that shattered the sterile silence while she prepared to launch a calculated attack on my remaining strength. She lunged forward to trap me against the freezing plaster wall while her fingers dug into my shoulders with a strength born of pure financial desperation. Her face was just inches from mine when she hissed a terrifying declaration that confirmed every suspicion we had ever harbored about her hidden malicious motives. With a voice dripping with absolute venom, she screamed, "I will take everything he has, including the house, and you deserve nothing but to live on the street." The sheer brutality of her words hung in the air like a physical weight, while I stared back at her without blinking or flinching from her aggressive touch. I maintained an unnervingly peaceful expression, while looking directly into her dilated pupils that were filled with a frantic, shimmering light of unbridled greed. My breathing remained remarkably steady as I chose my words carefully to ensure they would provoke her even further into exposing her darkest secrets on the hidden recording device. I finally spoke in a voice that was both quiet and remarkably firm by stating, "This is not the time to talk about this." My refusal to engage in her chaotic energy or beg for any mercy seemed to ignite a fresh wave of blinding fury within her chest. That lack of submission acted like high-octane fuel thrown onto a raging bonfire because Valerie immediately exploded into a prolonged fit of uncontrollable rage. She began hurling a relentless stream of bitter humiliations along with cruel insults at me for 15 consecutive minutes without pausing for even a single second of reflection. She mocked my years of selfless caregiving by calling me a pathetic loser who had wasted her youth on an old man who would never appreciate the sacrifice. Her words were sharp weapons designed to shred my self-esteem while she paced back and forth in front of the hospital bed, like a caged animal waiting to strike. Every sentence she uttered was a testament to her profound lack of empathy, as well as her complete detachment from the moral values Dad had taught us during our childhood in Louisiana. In her blind arrogance, she eventually bragged that the massive financial payout from selling our family estate was her only remaining escape route from an overwhelming gambling debt. She admitted that the creditors were closing in on her life, while she laughed about how no one could possibly stop her from claiming her legal share. Valerie sneered that the man lying on the bed was already essentially a ghost who would never be able to protect me from her upcoming legal maneuvers. She detailed her cruel plan to liquidate every antique item along with the very land we grew up on to satisfy her creditors. While Valerie was fully occupied with exposing her own terrifying cruelty, along with her selfish criminal plots, she remained blissfully unaware of the recording device hidden in my pocket. I stood there absorbing her verbal abuse in total silence, while allowing her to become increasingly intoxicated by the illusion of her own inevitable victory as she fully revealed the darkness of her true character. Every dark secret she revealed served as another heavy link in the legal chain that was slowly tightening around her future prospects as she unmasked her rotten soul. I watched her carefully while realizing that the path toward her ultimate punishment was now wide open and completely unavoidable, because her ego had become her greatest weakness throughout this entire deceptive process. The sterile hospital lighting seemed to cast long, distorted shadows that mirrored the ugliness of her soul while she continued to vent her frustrations without a single thought for our father. As soon as those cruel as well as heartless words left her lips, a deep, along with authoritative throat clearing sounded from directly behind us, causing the charged atmosphere in the room to freeze instantly. The heavy hospital door swung open with a resounding thud, while Mr. Collins, who had served as our family legal advisor for many decades, strode into the room with an unshakable sense of professional purpose. He carried a thick legal folder that remained securely sealed with dark red wax, while his sharp eyes focused directly on the back of Valerie's expensive designer blazer with a look of pure disapproval. The rhythmic sound of his polished shoes against the tile seemed to echo the finality of the situation while I stood back to allow the legal weight of his presence to occupy the sterile space. He did not offer any polite pleasantries or standard greetings because he was there to execute a specific plan that we had meticulously drafted during our private meetings at the house in Baton Rouge. My sister remained completely frozen in place while her manicured fingers gripped her leather handbag so tightly that her knuckles turned a ghostly shade of white under the harsh hospital lighting. While she was still standing there, paralyzed by the sudden arrival of the lawyer, an even more terrifying sight began to unfold directly behind her on the hospital bed. I watched with a mixture of intense relief, along with somber satisfaction, as Dad slowly opened his eyes, while his gaze locked onto the back of his eldest daughter's head with terrifying intensity. He reached up with remarkably steady hands to calmly peel away the fake medical sensors, as well as the adhesive patches that had been used to create the illusion of his impending demise. There was no sign of the weakness or confusion that she had so eagerly anticipated just moments before when she was screaming her threats at me. He sat up with a firm and deliberate movement while his back remained perfectly straight against the pillows as he prepared to deliver his final judgment upon the woman who shared his blood. The sheer intensity of his stare was filled with a combination of burning indignation along with the profound sorrow of a father who had finally seen the bottomless depths of his child's betrayal. He spoke with a voice that was incredibly cold as well as devastatingly clear, while effectively shattering every single one of her greedy illusions in a matter of seconds. Looking her directly in the eye while she slowly turned around in absolute horror, he declared with finality, "I heard every single word, Valerie. Your greed has officially cost you your family." The weight of his words seemed to drain the remaining oxygen from the room, while she desperately searched for a lie to cover the truth she had so proudly shouted just seconds ago. He did not allow her the opportunity to speak or offer a pathetic apology, because his disappointment was far too deep for any words to bridge the massive gap she had created. His voice remained remarkably steady despite the immense emotional pain, while he officially severed the ties that had once bound us together as a family unit in this very city. Without missing a single beat or showing even a hint of emotion, Mr. Collins immediately opened the sealed folder while his professional voice took on a tone of absolute legal finality. He adjusted his glasses while looking directly at the shivering woman who was now realizing the sheer magnitude of her catastrophic error in judgment. He delivered the blow that would officially end her financial ambitions by stating with complete authority, "As of this moment, all your rights to the inheritance are permanently revoked." This specific legal declaration meant that every cent she had planned to use for her gambling debts was now completely out of her reach, forever. The document he held contained the specific amendments we had discussed in private, while ensuring that she would never benefit from the estate she had so eagerly tried to liquidate. Every legal protection she thought she possessed was stripped away in a matter of seconds, while the reality of her total ruin began to sink in. Valerie began to tremble uncontrollably while she fell back against the metal bed frame with a frantic desperation as her voice rose into a series of high-pitched screams for mercy. She started sobbing while her words became a jumbled mess of pathetic excuses as she attempted to weave a series of lies about her true behavior during the past 15 minutes. She tried to claim that her words were merely a result of extreme stress, or that I had somehow manipulated the entire situation to make her look like a monster. However, the cold silence from my father, along with the professional indifference of Mr. Collins, made it perfectly clear that every exit was now securely locked against her. Her tears were not born of genuine regret or love, but rather the terrifying realization that her carefully constructed lifestyle was disappearing right before her eyes. I stood by the door while watching her world crumble into pieces while knowing that she had built this specific trap for herself with every greedy word she chose to speak. She reached out her hands to grab my father's gown, but he pulled away with a look of pure disgust that finally ended her frantic attempts to regain her position. Several weeks after that intense night at the local hospital, every legal procedure required to permanently sever the inheritance rights, along with the family membership of Valerie, was officially finalized by the state court. Mr. Collins handled every single document with meticulous precision to ensure that she would never have a legal leg to stand on if she ever attempted to challenge the ruling in the future. The consequences arrived with a brutal intensity that perfectly mirrored the harsh financial reality of life within the United States, where creditors do not show a single ounce of mercy to those who fall behind on their massive debts. Because she no longer possessed the promised backing of our family estate, the banks, along with the private lenders, moved in with terrifying speed to seize her luxury apartment and every piece of expensive designer clothing she owned. Within a matter of days, she was officially evicted from her high-end lifestyle, while being forced to face the cold reality of her own making without a single person to turn to for help. Now completely broke, while carrying a crushing weight of underground gambling debt, she was forced to relocate to a distant poor state where she began working exhausting manual labor shifts just to afford a basic room. I heard through the grapevine that she spent her days performing back-breaking tasks in a noisy warehouse while barely earning enough cents to cover her daily meals. There was absolutely no sympathy offered from our side of the family because the memory of her screaming those cruel insults at a supposedly dying man remained burned into our minds forever. She had chosen to trade her birthright for the thrill of the betting table, and now the cold silence of her lonely existence was the only companion she had left in the world. Her fall from grace was total, while the high heels she once used to march through our home were replaced by heavy work boots that symbolized her new life of endless struggle. Back in our aging brick house in Baton Rouge, the heavy humidity of Louisiana finally began to feel like a peaceful embrace rather than a suffocating weight for myself, along with Dad. We focused all our energy on healing our fractured spirits while restoring the garden to its former glory with fresh magnolias as well as sturdy oak saplings that represented our renewed bond. Our relationship grew stronger than ever before as we realized that removing the toxic influence of Valerie was the only way to truly find lasting peace within our own walls. We spent our evenings on the porch listening to the crickets, while knowing that our home was finally safe from the predatory greed that had nearly destroyed everything we built over several generations. This hard-won tranquility was the ultimate reward for our courage to face the